Oh, there are so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless. Welcome. If you're a Canadian business owner, building your company is really only half the battle. The other, arguably more critical half, is structuring it the right way to protect your wealth and secure your family's future. Today, we're going to dive deep into two of the most powerful tools you have for this, the holding corporation versus the family trust. So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll define what these structures actually are. Then, we'll get into the really juicy stuff, the capital gains exemption. After that, we'll look at succession and estate planning. Then cover the practical side of things, protection, cost, and longevity. And finally, we'll wrap it all up to help you figure out what the right choice might be for you. All right, let's get right into it. Before we can even start talking about which one is better, we have to understand what we're dealing with. On the surface, they might seem to do similar things, but believe me, how they work under the hood is fundamentally different. So let's start with the holding corporation, or what you'll almost always hear called a holdco. Now, the first thing to get straight is that this isn't some special, magical type of company. It's just a regular Canadian corporation. Its main job, its whole purpose, is to hold assets, specifically the shares of your active operating business, your OpCo. So how do you actually create this? Well, this is where it gets interesting. You can't just sell your valuable OpCo shares to your new holdco. Why not? Because that would trigger a massive tax bill. Instead, we use a really neat tool in our Income Tax Act called a Section 85 rollover. This lets you transfer those shares at their original cost, not their current high value, which means you get to defer all of that capital gains tax. It's an absolutely essential move. Okay, now let's switch gears completely. A family trust, this is a totally different animal. It is not a corporation, it's a legal relationship between three different parties. You have the settlor, who creates the trust, you have trustees, who legally control and manage the assets, and then you have the beneficiaries, your family usually, who get to enjoy the benefits. It's a clever way to separate control from ownership. The setup strategy here is also different. It's called an estate freeze. Think of it like this. You take a snapshot of your business's value today, and you freeze that value in your own hands with special preferred shares. Then you create the family trust, and it subscribes for new common shares. This means all the future growth, everything the company earns from that day forward, happens for the benefit of your family members in the trust. Okay, now we know what they are, so let's put them to the test against our first big goal, maximizing the lifetime capital gains exemption, the LCGE. Honestly, if you own a private business in Canada, this is one of the crown jewels of our tax system. You absolutely need to understand it. So what is it? Well, this exemption allows every single individual to earn over $1 million in capital gains, completely tax-free, when they sell their business shares. To put that in perspective, we are talking about saving somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 in cash taxes per person. It's a massive, massive benefit. But, and this is a big but, it's not automatic. Your company has to pass some very strict tests. The most important ones are all about asset purity. Basically, the government wants to make sure the company is a real active business, not just a piggy bank for passive investments. And you have to plan for this at least 2 years before you even think about selling. And this right here, this is where the two paths really diverge. With a holdco structure, what usually happens? Profits go up to the holdco and get invested. Well, that contaminates the whole structure with passive assets, making it almost impossible to pass those purity tests. But the trust structure, it's designed specifically to solve this. Profits flow through the trust to a totally separate company, keeping your main operating business clean and perfectly qualified for the exemption. But wait, it gets even better. The real magic of the trust is that you can multiply this exemption. Each beneficiary, your spouse, your kids, can claim their own personal LCGE on the shares. So with 4 family members, you can shelter up to $5 million in gains. That's potentially over $1 million in tax savings compared to just owning the shares yourself. It's an incredibly powerful tool that a holdco simply can't match. Okay, so for a tax-efficient sale, the trust is the clear winner, no question. But what if you're not selling? What if your dream is passing the business down to your kids? How do our two structures stack up them? Well, with a holdco, if you want to give shares to your children, the tax man treats it as if you sold them for full price. Ouch. That means an immediate tax bill for you. But with a family trust, the trustees can distribute those shares to the kids on a tax-free basis. This gives you unbelievable flexibility to pass the torch without getting hit by a huge upfront tax liability. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? A trust gives you the ultimate flexibility. You don't have to predict the future. You can wait and see which of your children are truly passionate and capable before you decide how to divide ownership. A corporate structure forces you to carve those decisions in stone today. So far, it sounds like the family trust is winning, hands down on both tax and succession. But that is not the whole story. Let's get into the practical reality check asset protection, setup costs, and how long these things can actually last. All right, first up, asset protection. On this front, it's a tie. Both structures are excellent at separating your safe investment assets from the risks of the day-to-day business. But here's where the scales start to tip back a bit. The holdco is just simpler and cheaper. We're talking lower setup costs and standard annual filings that any good accountant can handle. A trust is more complex, more expensive to set up, and requires specialized tax returns every year. And here is a core, and I mean core, structural advantage for the holding corporation. It has perpetuity. A corporation, as a legal entity, can exist forever. It can be passed down from generation to generation without any built-in expiry date. The family trust, on the other hand, has an Achilles heel. It's called the 21-year rule. Because of our tax laws, every 21 years, a trust is forced to pretend it sold all its assets for fair market value. This deemed disposition can trigger a devastating tax bill on decades of growth, essentially putting a ticking clock on the entire structure. It has an expiry date. Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground, from complex tax rules to long-term family strategies. So let's bring it all home. After weighing all the pros and cons, what's the final verdict? Which one is the right choice? Well, if we look at the scorecard, it's pretty clear. The family trust is the undisputed champion if your main goals are multiplying that incredible capital gains exemption and having a flexible, tax-friendly succession plan for your kids. On the flip side, the holding corporation is the workhorse. It shines because of its simplicity, its lower cost, and most critically, its permanence. If your goal is to build a financial fortress that can hold assets for generations to come with no forced end date, the holdco is absolutely the more robust choice. So here's the most important thing to remember. There is no single best answer. It's not about which structure is better in a textbook. It's about which structure is better for you. Are you planning to sell in the next 10 to 15 years? Or are you building a 100-year legacy? It's all about aligning the structure to your specific goals. This whole framework is really designed to empower you. So the question I want to leave you with is right here on the screen. Now that you have these tools, which structure aligns with the future you envision? Your next step is to take this knowledge and have a much deeper conversation with your tax and legal advisors, so you can go from simply running a successful business to truly building an enduring legacy.